Happy to be back at another UTE. They still invite me despite working for VMware, so that's all good. And we sponsored the event, so that's also awesome. I'm Sean. I'm the CTO of end-user computing at VMware, and I'm here to give a EUC industry trend as well as a VMware EUC update. So we'll make this part commercial and part just general trends of the industry. So bear with me. So here's a quick agenda we're going to go through. I'm going to help you guys fill out your bullshit bingo cards by talking a little bit about digital transformation and digital workspace. So make sure you guys get your slots filled out when I mentioned transformation and digital a couple of times. Spend some time talking about Windows 10 the enterprise and why Windows 10 is so exciting.
Well, this one I have.
By the way, Ingmar, we love Microsoft too.
Very good. We love you too.
Talk about Windows 10 in the enterprise and why that's transformational. Enterprise mobility management and unified endpoint management and how that fits into Windows 10. And we'll spend some time talking about VMware's Workspace 1 and Horizon 7 launches that were this quarter. I'll talk a little bit about kind of what those products did and where we're kind of headed. So, first, get your bingo cards ready. The world is going digital, and specifically in digital, I like to, people use the term digital transformation a lot, and I think that means different things to different people. Some people think of digital transformation as the process of moving from paper to electronic, and that's of course part of it, but we've been doing that for like 20 years. There's nothing particularly interesting about that. To me, digital transformation, I think one of the definitions that I love the most is by a gentleman named Brian Solis from the Altimeter Group in a 2014 white paper they published that said, digital transformation is the realignment of or new investment in technology and business models, so it's both technology and business process change, to more effectively engage digital customers at every touch point in the customer experience lifecycle. So that's a lot of words that means different things to different people. But I think what's really good about that comment is it tells you that this is not only about technology. Yes, technology is an enabler of digital transformation, but really it's about transforming business processes. It's about taking things that take 6 weeks because of a whole lot of people process problems and streamlining it and driving that down to take minutes or hours. And a good use case example I give of this is, think of the traveling salesperson who goes to the airport and the customer calls them or texts them about 10 minutes before they're ready to board a plane. And the customer says, hey, Joe, thanks for that updated presentation you gave us. We want to purchase, but the quote you sent me, the quantity is wrong. We really need 100,000 licenses, not 10,000 licenses. So can you revise that for me? And in today's world, the sales guy's like, yeah, sure, no problem. They crack open their laptop. They spend 2 minutes trying to get on the airport Wi-Fi, getting logged in, all that kind of stuff, logging into their machine, starting their VPN, putting in their two-factor code, and 7 minutes later, he's finally logged into the sales system, ready to make that change, generate a new PDF, and email it off to the customer. This obviously doesn't help that salesperson achieve the goal of getting it off to the customer very quickly, and as a result, didn't potentially make the sale right away, might have missed the quarter quota for getting that off in that quarter. And overall, the salesperson's quite frustrated that the process took so long and he wasn't able to. Do I have 2 mics on right now? Yeah. Sounding kind of loud there. So anyway, thinking about this in the new way of digital transformation, we should be able to allow customers, allow our employees, service customers in a matter of 20 or 30 seconds. So from their smartphone or tablet, be able to do one-click access, launch their application, single sign-on, no VPNs, open up the sales order system through single sign-on, adjust the quantity, and click one link to send out an updated quote to the customer. And inside of 30 seconds, they're hopping on their plane and the customer has the updated quote. That's an example of what I mean by digital transformation. So making it so people can service customers faster. Because if you service your customers faster, you generate more revenue and everyone's happy. And again, the main point about digital transformation is it's about a life cycle of interaction with customers. It's not just only the example I use for the salesperson servicing somebody in 10 seconds versus 7 minutes. It's also things like customer support related issues, being able to very quickly address those things. So anyway, I hope you fill out your bingo cards. Let me move on to the next thing. So digital workspace, what does digital workspace actually mean? Digital workspace to us is the application of technology as an enabler to solve those problems of trying to service the customer. So how can technology enable that salesperson to solve the problem in 10 seconds versus 7 minutes? And we use two kind of terms to indicate our mission in enabling digital workspace. And those terms are consumer simple and enterprise secure. Now what do I mean specifically by consumer simple and enterprise secure? Consumer simple is the easy one. Everyone gets it. When the iPhone came out in 2007 and Android shortly thereafter, as those enterprise app stores evolved and as the phones evolved, you didn't have to teach an end user how to use these devices. They were intuitive enough to take out of the box and launch applications, find the app store, download a few apps, and be productive. In fact, I made the decision to finally go iPhone after handing my daughter, who was like 5 at the time, an iPhone, a BlackBerry, and an Android device. And she had the iPhone up and working in literally a couple of minutes and was downloading apps and playing with the phone. So I was like, well, if a 5-year-old can do it, I can do it. So we want to make sure that we can make our technology consumable for customers in an easy-to-use fashion, as opposed to the state of enterprise IT right now, where somebody goes to join your company and it's 6 weeks before you have a PC out to the user with the applications entitled to them and they're productive. And this is just simply not the way it can be in the future. So we gotta embrace this mobile cloud era so that people can do 0-day starts, be productive, and not have to wait for IT to service them on a very lengthy schedule. So consumer simplicity is key. The problem is balancing consumer simplicity and enterprise security is always an iffy game. Because many times making things stupid simple means they're horribly insecure. So you need to make sure you find a balancing act between those two. On the enterprise security side, VMware does a number of different things that helps enterprise security. Obviously, we have vSphere, trusted platform, all those types of things. But certain technologies like NSX are transformational when it comes to security. Because things like microsegmentation allows us to greatly reduce the data center communications traffic for a virtual desktop or a virtual app. So when somebody does compromise one of your machines, they can only spread to 5 other machines in the data center rather than attacking 10,000 other devices. So balancing that simplicity and security is really, really key. And you're going to hear VMware's messaging over the coming weeks and months to focus even more on security. Stay tuned, there will be a very big announcement coming up shortly. Not in this session, but shortly thereafter. So, the key tenets of digital workspace from our point of view is consolidating all applications into a single place. So kind of, single place to access any application, whether it's Windows, web, mobile. And allow that to be accessed on any device with one identity. And identity is the key piece of this. So the any app, any device thing has been used numerous times. That's obviously an old hat at this point. But the single identity is a key tenet of enabling digital workspace. People should not have to go through hoops to authenticate in and to access the resources. And then enabling self-service so that users can request their own applications, and developing workflow automation processes so that new applications can be enabled that might require a provisioning process or a license allocation process. So making sure that IT can still have their control processes even though users just go and say request application, and then 2 days later the app shows up after IT has done the workflow provisioning. And then obviously one platform to serve any user and give them amazing experiences. Now, VMware is not the only company endorsing this general trend. If you look at what the analysts are saying, Gartner and Forrester, there isn't a magic quadrant per se or a specific criteria that the analysts have done to classify workspace necessarily. But many of them are focusing on analyzing this space called digital workplace and figuring out how that applies to modern IT. So many analysts are looking at this space and trying to figure out how it maps to current IT trends. Now, one thing that's happening that hasn't really happened yet, but I'm beginning to see it happen over a period of time, is you have all these different technologies. You've got VDI and terminal services, you've got MDM initially, mobile application management, and eventually the whole EMM suite. And you have sort of the legacy PC lifecycle management that's existed for 30 years. And one of the things that's occurring is that we're starting to see a convergence of these tool sets. Because the reality is today for enterprise IT, if you have VDI and you have terminal server or XenApp, and you have laptops and desktops, and you have tablets and smartphones, you probably have 3 different sets of management stacks to deal with each of those things. Because the PCLM tools that you manage laptops and desktops with doesn't work well in VDI environments and ZenNet environments, so you use a different set of tools for that. And then tablets and smartphones aren't well managed from PCLM tools, and so you have a separate tool for that. And people are kind of getting tired of having different management tools for different types of devices. At the end of the day, a device is a device, and you shouldn't have to treat it differently just because it's a different form factor. So there is absolutely the desire for a convergence of platforms where you can manage devices, the same set of tools and the same processes regardless of what kind of device it is. And there are many industry analysts that are talking about what's called third platform convergence for systems management. So Gartner, Forrester, all the typical analysts are covering this space and saying that somewhere in the next 5 years, most customers will arrive at a situation where they converge on a single set of management tools. And we believe very strongly in this at VMware AirWatch, and we're focusing on doing this. Obviously, while all that convergence stuff is going on, we still have continued consumerization, huge increases in BYOD occurring. I don't know how it's happening in Europe. In the US, BYOD is growing very, very rapidly. And then we obviously have the continued app explosion. The growth in Windows apps is somewhat plateaued, but obviously iOS and Android app growth continues to grow at an amazing rate. So I spent a little bit of time talking about Windows 10 in the enterprise and why I personally am quite excited about Windows 10. But first, I want to talk about kind of the Microsoft point of view. Microsoft wants to have 1 billion devices running Windows 10 in the next 2 to 3 years. And to put things in perspective, and this is a real data point. There are 300 million devices on Windows 10 as of May 2016. So that's a factual data point confirmed by Microsoft. So they're already, almost a third of the way there. So that's quite nice. These are estimates that I gathered from a number of different sources. It's estimated there's about 200 million devices running Windows 8. That was much higher a few months ago. There's approximately 750 million running Windows 7. And there's about 150 million, yes, still running Windows XP. So it seems plausible that within 2 to 3 years they can reach that billion devices. But if you look at some of the data, you can see this, and by the way, these data points are not super accurate. It doesn't come from Microsoft, it comes from browser usage statistics on the internet, so it's not completely accurate. But this is the data from August 2015, which showed Windows 7 about half the population, Windows 10 was about 20%, Windows 8 was 15%, XP was 11%, and then everything else kind of falls off from there. Updated data as of last month actually shows that Windows 7 and Windows 10 are slightly lower, but again, that's just reporting data that's not completely accurate. What's interesting though is the Windows XP number has fallen a little bit from the previous data, but what's really interesting is Windows 8 has ceded a lot of percentage of usage, down from almost 16% down to 8.77%. So what this basically tells you is that Microsoft's strategy of offering the free upgrade from Windows 7 and Windows 8 for consumers is driving a lot of people to move from 8 to 10. So that's a good thing. What's a fascinating thing is out of the whole PC market, there's somewhere between 1.5 billion and 2 billion PCs in the marketplace. Not all of those are used in the enterprise. It's kind of a 50-50 split between enterprise and consumer. So there's roughly 700 to 900 million enterprise and 700 to 900 million consumer. But what's troubling, if you think about it, this is Microsoft's core problem right now, is that device shipments by OS as of 2015 was about 283 million for Windows devices. And there were about 297 million iOS and OS X devices, and there were 1.3 billion Android devices shipped. Now granted, the profit margin and the profit derived from each of these devices is completely different, because a smartphone, it's very, very low margin. But the bottom line is that, from user population using these operating systems, smartphones and tablets are disrupting the desktop laptop space. Now again, many people probably heard that, for many, many years, Microsoft has owned 97% of the PC real estate in terms of footprint that's running Windows. So 97% of the PCs in the world run Windows. However, the latest data points on that show that it's dropped to about 90% are running Windows today. So it is a definite trend that's occurring that Microsoft is losing desktop market share over time. So, but the point is, there are still 1.5 billion devices out there, maybe close to 2 billion, and half of those are enterprise devices, and chances are in the enterprise, 99% of those are running Windows. So there's a good opportunity for Microsoft to capture between 1 and 1.5 billion PCs on their platform and retain them for years to come. So Windows 10 is officially the fastest adopted version of Windows ever. Obviously, it's free for consumers, so there's very little barrier to adoption. It's a free upgrade, so why wouldn't you do it? Similar resource consumption as Windows 7 and Windows 8. So if your PC can run Windows 7 or Windows 8, basically anything made in the last 4 years, it can run Windows 10. So I'm sure most of you in here are running it and quite happy with it. A lot of work went into the ease of upgrade and ease of management. So very high app compatibility for Windows 7 and Windows 8. This is particularly true if you are running Windows 7 x64 or Windows 8 x64 because the applications are largely highly compatible. The data point I quote, which some people agree and disagree with, is if you have a 64-bit version of 7 or 8, you will have about 99.5% app compatibility, and very few applications won't work on Windows 10. The vast majority of compatibility challenges that you're going to have are going to be focused on the Microsoft Edge browser, which you can just run IE 11 enterprise mode and sidestep that problem. So very little problem with app compatibility. Also, Microsoft has finally, in my mind, nailed in-place upgrades. The only caveat to in-place upgrades, and most people don't realize this with Windows 10, but if you want to take advantage of some of the new security enhancements in Windows 10, one of them being Credential Guard, one being Device Guard, both of those features depend on a capability named Virtualization-Based Security that installs a Hyper-V role on the system, and they have a dependency on something named Secure Boot, which has a dependency on UEFI BIOS or replacement. So if you're running older hardware running Windows 7, chances are you're using BIOS and you're not using UEFI. And if you're using BIOS and not using UEFI, you can't enable Secure Boot. If you can't enable Secure Boot, you can't enable virtualization-based security. So it's kind of a catch-22 problem. So basically what I'm saying is you can do in-place upgrades if you don't want to enable the new high security features. If you want to enable the new high security features, you will have to do an image-based rip and replace of the system, or do your 25% turnover year over year and then replace the devices through attrition if you want to take advantage of security features. Really cool capability Microsoft added to Windows 10 is something called runtime provisioning. We take advantage of this in AirWatch, and others take advantage of it in their EMM platforms. But what runtime provisioning lets you do is send down a task sequence, very similar to what you have in MDT or SCCM, that traditionally, when you would build images for systems, you would build your WIM file and you'd ship your multi-gigabyte image all over your branch offices, and then you would basically pixie boot your PCs, re-image them on Windows 10, and then push down all your applications. The problem is, in order to do things with imaging, is you have to get the PCs shipped to a service center where somebody can put the image down on it, put all the user's applications, and then ship it to the user. Because you never want to ship it to the user without having the system actually ready to be used. So what runtime provisioning does is it takes a different approach to preparing machines. What you basically do is you get an OEM version of the machine from Dell, HP, Lenovo, whoever your preferred provider is, and you drop ship it directly to the customer. When the customer receives the device, they log into the PC, and as part of their workplace join, which is basically the cloud domain join process for AAD, you can automatically enroll the Windows 10 device into an EMM provider's management system. So in the case of AirWatch, when somebody does a workplace join of a Windows 10 device, we automatically enroll into AirWatch. Now that it's enrolled in AirWatch, we can take the things that would normally be done through group policy as part of an Active Directory participation, and we can push those policies through the EMM APIs directly down to the PC and configure the firewall, security policies, all those types of things. In addition, runtime provisioning gives you the ability to say, this device ships from the OEM with 16 pieces of crapware that I don't want on the machine. So as part of this task sequence, I want you to remove all of these GUIDs of all of these pieces of software and uninstall them. And then I want you to push these 10 or 15 MSIs so the system effectively ends up reaching the same state as your base image would contain all of your necessary software, and you've removed all the vendor bloatware. Now there are some industries like government and military that will probably not be satisfied with this runtime provisioning process because they won't trust that the system isn't rooted from the manufacturer. So they'll probably still do image preparation. But for all the others that aren't as security paranoid, runtime provisioning offers a great way to drop ship a PC to a user and have it up and running and functional in a matter of hours rather than taking 6 weeks to get the person their PC. Most importantly, Windows 10 has full enterprise mobility management APIs. So Windows 7 and Windows 8 and Windows 8.1 had a very, very small amount of APIs that were EMM ready. So if you were to deploy AirWatch or Zen Mobile or Intune or any other EMM platform to try to manage those devices, you would not be able to control a lot of the security settings, the firewall policies, all these kinds of things. So what Microsoft did in Windows 10 was actually said, we want to make it so that the vast majority of things that you would normally do through group policy or through System Center, we're going to let you do those things through EMM APIs. That way, devices can be cloud managed rather than on-premises managed. So that's the big, huge innovation in Windows 10. And we've been working with Microsoft for a period of about 2 years to ensure that AirWatch has the greatest number of these APIs configured in our platform. Also, Windows 10 is not Windows 8. And that's a huge reason why I think it's going to be greatly successful. I hear this from a lot of CIOs and CTOs I talk to about their interest in moving to Windows 10. And everyone, I think, in the industry as a whole, waited a little bit too long to get off of XP. Now, XP to 7 was a difficult transition because in most cases we were going from x86 to x64, which complicated a lot of things. But most people dragged their feet a little bit too long, and as a result found themselves in breach of support and having to pay Microsoft a very large amount of money to continue support on XP beyond the end of life of the product. So, my opinion, Windows 10 will be a huge catalyst for end-user computing change. The reality is right now, the vast majority of Windows 10 deployments are in the consumer space because of that free offering. But almost every customer I talk to is already underway with proof of concepts and pilots, and many of them are planning their deployments in H2 2016 and H1 2017. So I think it's going to move quite aggressively. I'm going to cover a couple of things in enterprise mobility management that are happening. For those that don't know, smartphones outsold PCs back in 2011, so we've had 5 years of smartphones crushing PCs in terms of volume shipment. Today there's about 2.5 to 3 billion smartphones. Over 1 billion tablets and somewhere between 1.5 to 2 billion PCs. By 2020, smartphones will have more than doubled to 6 billion devices. There will be almost a smartphone for every person on the planet. By 2020, tablets will be somewhere between 1.5 to 2 billion devices. So tablets have plateaued a little bit. They're still going to continue to grow due to devices coming down in cost. By 2020, more than 70% of the world's people will have smartphones. In many low-income countries like Brazil, India, China, Russia, these devices are the only compute device that these people own. So everything is being done from a mobile transaction perspective. If you look at the change in volume of desktop-initiated browser usage versus mobile-initiated browser usage in countries like India, the mobile browser usage has overtaken desktop browser usage as of like 2 to 3 years ago. So there are more people using mobile internet than there are using desktop PC internet. That's going to happen all over the world. By 2020, fifth generation networks will be fully deployed, or in some cases fully deployed, with as much as 20 gigabits of bandwidth. And what's really amazing about 5G to me isn't even the gigabits of bandwidth. I mean, that's amazing in and of itself. But it's the fact that the latency involved in the mobile carrier network is going to be measured in single-digit milliseconds. So unlike today on fourth generation LTE networks where your millisecond ping latency can range anywhere from 20 to 80 milliseconds for round trip time. And I'm not talking about all the way back to your data center, but just from you to the internet. In fifth generation networks, they're optimizing this to where your latency will be anywhere between 1 to 5 milliseconds for you to the internet. At that latency and at this bandwidth amount, you can run a remoted application and not be able to discern that the application is being delivered remotely. I mean, you can, in some cases, almost not discern it on LTE today if you've got a good connection. But when you have 20 gigs of bandwidth and 5 milliseconds of latency, I would challenge the average user to tell me that this app is local or remote. They won't be able to tell, which opens up a whole new set of interesting possibilities on how apps can be delivered to mobile devices. Device proliferation is going to continue to rise. In the US, we currently have 3.2 devices per person, and this is set to go up to about 5 devices per person on average. Now, for most people today, this is laptop, tablet, smartphone, but things like watches and augmented reality goggles and all sorts of other things are going to keep driving this number of devices per person up. Really interesting stat by Gartner, by 2018, more than 50% of people will use a tablet or smartphone first for all online activities. I already find myself doing this, even though I've got a PC with a keyboard and a mouse. I wake up in the morning and I check my email on my phone, and I do that for like 15 or 20 minutes, even though I could go to the PC and have a far richer experience, but it's laying right next to me and it's convenient to just go through it. Does anyone else do that? Or am I the only weird one? Okay, cool. So we're all part of Gartner's data at this point. IoT. The problem I have with IoT is almost everyone that talks about IoT today is really talking about IoT from a consumer point of view. Things like Nest thermostats and all these kind of things. But that's not really what IoT is about from my point of view. IoT is really about industrial IoT. How do we do things like smart cities and smart airports and manufacturing automation and sensor networks to be able to augment the capabilities we have in our smartphones and other smart devices. And in industries like healthcare, how can we do embedded devices using open standards that replace devices that are proprietary interfaces today and do all the development in open platforms like iOS and Android? Well, I shouldn't say not open, but more open than what they are today. So estimates are 25 billion devices by 2020. Some people say this number is conservative. It's going to be closer to 50 billion devices, which is a whole lot of systems. AirWatch is already managing IoT devices for several of our production customers. Many of you have probably heard of the Coca-Cola Freestyle project. We've got thousands of these vending machines that AirWatch is managing the QNX operating system that's running on the retail beverage dispenser. And we help them with the serviceability machines. We help them gather the data and send it back for analytics purposes. So we're doing that today already. We've got several other customers in flight doing our management platform for their technology as well. As I mentioned before, modern operating systems like Windows 10 and OS 10 are well managed from EMM platforms. iOS 8 and above and Android Lollipop have really great EMM management solutions and have built-in personal and work data separation, so you don't need to worry about doing SDK to wrap an application as an example. BYOD is on the rise, expected to more than double by 2020. This is largely driven by smartphones, but tablets and PCs are beginning to be used in BYOD capacity as well. One of the most interesting things I've heard from CXOs in the last couple of years is that they want to be out of the device management business. They want to either give people a stipend or just have them bring their own consumer device in and have no responsibility for the purchase, provisioning, or management of that device. So technologies like VDI and terminal servers starts to get really interesting in that kind of a model because we don't really care about the endpoint device, just let them come into the data center and do their thing. Future of systems management is what I'll call light touch, meaning that system imaging will decrease in the future. I'm not going to say it's going to completely go away, but the idea of building an image for PCs and pushing that image out is going to start to decline and eventually go away. As I mentioned before, because of BYOD and other trends, published Windows applications as a way of delivering the key legacy assets while the rest of the environment moves to things like SaaS. Because my prediction is in about the next 5 to 10 years, most companies will use more than half their software in a SaaS environment. And that basically means that the Windows applications they're using today will be displaced by alternatives that are completely cloud-based and they're SaaS. Also, many orgs are moving away from VPNs and relying more on micro VPN tunnels or per application VPN tunnels. iOS has had this since iOS 7, Android's had it since Lollipop, OS 10 has it since Mavericks, I think. Maybe it was even before that, Yosemite possibly, and Windows 10 has per app VPN now as well. So we no longer need device-level VPN tunnels. We just got to give people a VPN that wraps around an individual process and tunnels into the data center. And by the way, combining that with things like NSX means that when that app tunnels into the data center, we can terminate it on a single IP address and not let it have access to the whole data center. So if I have a malicious mobile application or malicious Windows application, I tunnel it to the data center, but I terminate it on one single IP so that if that mobile app gets in my data center, it can't wreak havoc on the whole thing and start spreading through my data center. A couple of things we've done in the industry. We have very tight partnerships with Apple, Google, Samsung, and Microsoft around Windows 10. We have a lot of partnerships around the cloud SaaS app platform. We have something called the Mobile Security Alliance. We partner with a large number of mobile security solutions on an open set of APIs they can use to interface with AirWatch for managing security on mobile devices. I also want to touch really quickly on app config. AirWatch created something called ACE. It was called App Config for the Enterprise. We created this a little over a year ago, and it was a way of creating a standard set of APIs for interfacing with common mobile security requirements like I need to encrypt the contents of this data file for this mobile application, or I want to prevent the ability to copy and paste or use open with controls in this mobile app. Historically, these were things that were done with mobile SDKs. So one of the first vendors to do a mobile SDK was Good with their Dynamics platform. But the problem with these application SDKs is that there's two problems really. One, you have to be able to get the iOS IPA or the Android APK, which is basically the package of the mobile app, from the vendor in order to wrap it with your security policies. In general, that's the normal process that's followed. And the challenge with doing that is some vendors, and Microsoft is a good one to pick on in this case, will not provide their IPAs or APKs. So you cannot wrap it with the traditional MAM SDKs. What you can do though is iOS since version 7 and Android since version Lollipop have actually made those security related controls built into the core operating system so that I can apply security policies for a mobile app directly from the OS platform. So what we did in the app config standard is we created a standard set of APIs that any ISV can call into to say sandbox encrypt this mobile app and all of its data, or prevent open with, or prevent copy paste. That way, a vendor like Salesforce can build one version of their app that will work across multiple EMM platforms, rather than having a version for Citrix, a version for VMware AirWatch, a version for Microsoft, a version for everybody. This app config standard, we've got 60 people, 60 ISVs that are part of it. And at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona in February, we announced that for the first time ever, we've onboarded 3 additional EMMs. So IBM Mass 360, Mobile Iron, and Jamf have joined the app config community, meaning that when a person downloads one of these apps, they can drop it on any of those 4 EMM platforms and it will work the same way across all 4. Google also just signed on at the Google I/O conference. They announced their participation in the app config community. So now we have a platform ISV that's embracing the app config community. We also have another 2 EMMs that will be launching possibly Q2, maybe Q3. So there's more EMM interest in joining this standard. So I want to talk really quickly, with my 7 minutes left, I want to cover what we launched in Q1, which is Workspace ONE. So Workspace ONE is combining some of the assets of our mobile platform, our desktop platform, and our identity platform into a consumable offering for customers. So the first thing that's important about Workspace ONE is we want to allow customers to be able to exchange a level of privacy or deployment versus a certain level of control. And what I mean by this is a person should be able to go in and use Workspace ONE simply by going to a browser on a kiosk PC, logging in and using their applications. It should not require any kind of deployment of software, a management agent, or anything like that. However, if they want to have access to confidential data where we have to be able to interrogate the endpoint device to ensure that it's not rooted, that it's not a keystroke logger or something like that, then we would require them to step up into a model where they enroll the device with the management agent so that we can validate that the device is secure. And so that we can do things like push down certificates in order to allow single sign-on to SAML resources automatically with the operating system. And then if you want to do it, you can do full device management for either selective, partial wipe, or full device wipe, depending on the corporate policy. One of the key things of the Workspace ONE offering is self-service access. So you can access Workspace ONE either through a web page portal, Safari, Chrome, IE, Edge, whatever, or you can access it from a native mobile application on iOS and Android. In addition, we announced as part of the Workspace ONE offering the industry-first mobile single sign-on. And what I mean by that is many identity providers have offered single sign-on to SaaS applications, and they all do it through the browser-based solution. So meaning I can go to salesforce.com in the browser and get single sign-on through SAML through my identity provider. What we're doing is with any of the app config enabled applications, we're actually intercepting the logon process in the native mobile application and redirecting it to our Identity Manager product and doing a single sign with the native mobile app. So no one else in the industry does this today. There are a few people that have done some open ID authentication implementation models, but nobody has broader support for a wide set of ISVs.
Available for all applications or just a set of applications?
Today it's for any of the app config enabled applications, so those 60 ISVs I showed you on the other slide. As more ISVs on board, their platforms will be made available, but you have to be able to have a way of pushing down certificates onto the mobile device and intercepting the login process and redirecting it. Obviously customized branding. We have single sign-on built into the platform. So for example, on iOS, we launched with Touch ID authentication. So when you open Workspace ONE, you just put your thumbprint on and you're logged in. We'll be launching that on Android shortly as well. So you can use Android or iOS and do fingerprint authentication and log right into Workspace ONE and launch a Windows app, a SaaS app, or a mobile app without having to type in any authentication. This is just an example of what the three-way trust model looks like for our, we call secure app token system. It establishes a relationship between a cloud-based Kerberos key distribution center, the mobile device, and SAML to authenticate to the SaaS service. Running short on time, so we're going to try to get through this kind of quickly. We have a secure email, chat, and content collaboration product. This is partly our secure content locker product that we had in the past, but it also includes an acquisition we made late last year of a company named Boxer that has a sort of reimagined email experience. If you guys aren't aware of Boxer, it's actually a consumer app that we're turning into an enterprise app. The consumer app is still available in the App Store and it's free, so you can download it. A couple of features that are in there that are really nice is, and I use this all the time because people say, hey Sean, when are you free to meet? And the normal workflow for that on iOS or Android is you're in the email, you double tap, you switch over to your calendar, you try to memorize all the times, then you go back to the email and try to retype in all the times over in your calendar. So in Boxer, there was a little button when you're composing the email that takes you to the calendar view inside the email client. You just tap on the fields of when you're free to talk, and then it embeds those times into the email, and you hit send, and they've got all the times that you're free. Not all of them, just whichever ones you select. So that's very cool. Then we also have quick replies built in, so you can say, I'll call you in 10 minutes. And we also have the ability to integrate in things like Dropbox. So rather than having to switch out to Dropbox, authenticate, find the file, generate a link, go back and paste it in, you can browse your Dropbox content, take the file and embed it in the email, and away you go. So it's available on the App Store for free. You guys can download Boxer and try it out. Conditional access is a combination of functionality between our identity management platform and can be enhanced by things like NSX. What it can basically do is use the intelligence about the device, the user, and the context of what they're trying to access to make conditional access decisions on the fly. So an example of this might be, if I have a corporate device that is enrolled with AirWatch and I know the device is not rooted, I can allow the person to access some confidential data like customer information in Salesforce or patient information inside of a healthcare application. But in the event the device they're coming from is not a trusted device, it's a BYO device that I have no visibility to, I can block access to that, either completely block access to it, or I can allow selective access in the application based on the security of the endpoint device. So I'm going to skip over some of this in interest of time. So this is kind of what the Workspace ONE editions look like. So what we've done is put everything that would be the basic productivity, identity, unified catalog, single sign-on into the standard edition. So this would be something you'd probably license for most, if not all, of your user population because it covers the single sign-on, unified app catalog, and productivity stuff. Then if you want to actually manage your PCs, laptops, smartphones, tablets, we have a unified endpoint management solution that also adds mobile application wrapping, the security tools, and DLP tools. And then if you need Windows apps and desktops, the Enterprise Edition covers that. So I'm not going to cover anything more on that. A minute and a half to talk about Horizon. Okay, so lots of innovation in the VDI RDSH space. Many people don't realize, but we've been putting out releases every single quarter that closes gaps versus competitors. So the most recent Q1 release, we've added support for Windows Media Redirection for Windows 10, file type association, 3D apps for RDSH, URL content redirection, and a tech preview of Flash redirection that will be going GA shortly. We also introduced a new protocol named Blast Extreme. You guys probably followed this if you watched the launch information, but a couple of things about Blast Extreme that are interesting is it supports both TCP and UDP, which was a long-time complaint that some people had about PC over IP, that it's UDP only. So it supports both protocol types. It also leverages H.264, so on mobile devices that have an H.264 decoder chip, which is pretty much every smartphone and tablet made in the last 5 years, as well as PCs, can do hardware-assisted decoding to offload from the CPU on the endpoint device. So better battery life, better performance, less CPU impact. In addition, Blast and PC over IP operate independently, and all of the virtual channel capabilities are operable on both of these protocols this exact same way. And we support all of the client platforms. The only difference here is HTML5 is Blast only. It does not support PC over IP. Just-in-time desktops was an innovation that we talked about 2 years ago at VMware 2014. We actually launched in Horizon 7. It's a very rapid cloning mechanism, allows you to clone PCs in less than 5 seconds, fully Active Directory joined, sitting in a Control-Alt-Delete screen. So we launched this with Horizon 7, but we also announced at Citrix Synergy something named Project Orion, which is instant clone for Zen Desktop. So as long as the customer is using vSphere 6 and they're putting Zen Desktop on top of it, we can use our instant clone technology for Zen Desktop customers as well. This is in tech preview right now. We're launching GA a little bit later this year. Smart Policies. Smart Policies is fairly similar to Citrix Smart Access if you're familiar with that. We leverage our UEM technology to provide contextual access to things like client drive access, clipboard access, USB access depending on client IP, computer name, OU, whatever the case may be. So that's now in Horizon 7, and I'm out of time.